Hello, I'm
Hello.
Brian Galbraith. I'm owner of Galbraith Family Law. We're a law firm of divorce and family law lawyers with offices in Toronto, Newmarket, and Barrie. We have 15 lawyers right now, all doing family law. And I am really pleased today to speak with Amrit Malhotra, who is the owner and operator of Invicta Counseling. This is her own business. She has a master's degree in social work and has been counseling and helping people deal with trauma for many years. Is that right? You've in various aspects of trauma. I think you were telling me the other day that you've helped people who have been victims of sexual assault, victims of workplace issues, and first line workers like people who are, I guess, ambulance drivers and those sorts of people who are uh, experience trauma through their work, right? You've been doing this for a while, right?
Yes, yes,
I think you said over 27 years.
that's correct. Yes, thank you.
Wow, that is like amazing, and I sure appreciate you coming here today to share with us something about trauma, divorce, and the pandemic. It's a big issue. People are having a hard time, and I want to hear from you what that looks like. What is trauma? I've got your PowerPoint here. I can share on the screen with folks, um, and uh, so it's trauma, divorce, and the pandemic. So tell us about what that means to you. What is trauma?
Okay, well, trauma is the response to a deeply distressing or disturbing event that overwhelms an individual's ability to cope. And that's why I think it's quite significant to talk about divorce in relation to the pandemic, because not only are people struggling with the uh, breakdown of relationships, but they're also dealing with a very uncertain time with the pandemic, which is bringing up um, a lot of insecurities and uncertainties about what the future looks like.
And you were saying that a trauma might not necessarily just be a single event. It could be just a whole process, like the divorce process over time. It's not a particular thing that happened necessarily on one day. It could be a period of time in your life. Is that right?
That's correct. I mean, there could be many other traumas that one person has experienced, and there could be a layering, even going through all the uncertainty around what will happen to your home that you currently reside in, what will happen with the co-parenting of the children, what will happen through the court process. There are lots of different places where people can be impacted, even just how society or your own family or community reacts to the separation and divorce. That can also be very, very upsetting for people.
Yeah, and I like the way you said it as layering, especially at this time. Now folks have this added layer of the uncertainty related to the pandemic, right? And so that just it amplifies it, makes I think I would guess that you're busier than ever during the pandemic trying to help people with suffering from trauma.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, yeah, so people are coming. You might have seen them because of the trauma related to their divorce or what have you, but there's more because the pandemic is making it worse for people. Is that what you're experiencing, or tell me more?
Yes, well, I think that it is kind of a unique situation because people usually have the separation between work and home, for example, and they're able to leave that environment if the environment is not suitable and there's upset or there's conflict. But now people are having to reside in the same home where they work, and they're not getting that break from it. And they're also dealing with homeschooling of the children, which is just adding, compounding their stress. There's a lot of readjustment that needs to take place during this time, and divorce in itself is very um, traumatic for people to go through. In fact, the Holmes and Ray social readjustment rating scale states that death of a spouse comes at scores at 100, but a divorce is scored at 76. So it's very, very high up there. And if we go a little bit further down, separation is at 65, and death of a close family member and personal injury or illness comes below that. So if we look at the rating scale, we know that just going through a divorce process is extremely, extremely stressful. And also dealing with potential illnesses, which we're seeing with COVID, is equally as distressing. And so, because of that, we're having to respond to everything that's taking place, and it's overwhelming for one person. I'm going to just quote Anne Bushko, who's a psychologist in California. She states, trauma changes the chemistry in your body. You're flooded with adrenaline and cortisol, the stress hormones. Your heart rate and blood pressure go up. You get ready to run for your life or fight for survival, and you are stopped in your tracks, the deer in the headlight. It is the flight, fight, or freeze reaction built into your brain to help you survive threats to you, your very existence. Your emotional brain hijacks your thinking brain. The end of a marriage can feel like a threat to whom you are as a person and your very existence. So I think it's very telling when you hear something like this.
That's a really great description of it. And so many of our clients come to us for divorce, and they're so overwhelmed by the trauma of it, that it's hard to get good instructions from them. Even we, as lawyers, we want to make sure that our clients are making good decisions coming from their best self. And so often, when they are experiencing a trauma, they're, as you said in that quote, their thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, is not working. It's out of commission, right? And it's really hard. People are struggling. You mentioned their lack of identity, or not changing identity,
Changing.
and uncertainty related to that can be a huge part of it. And your next slide is pretty amazing. It looks at all the different impacts of trauma on a person's life. Loss of sense of the future, their hopelessness, shame and worthlessness, emotionally overwhelmed. Oh man, general anxiety. We see a lot of people who have a lot of anxiety when they're going through a separation or divorce, and it's so hard for them.
Absolutely. This is adapted from Bremner and Marmer, 1998. And then there's a quote that's below, that's trauma survivors have symptoms instead of memories, by Harvey in 1990. This is a very important slide to show people that there are many different responses to trauma that one could experience. And it's not necessary that you would experience all of these things, but it's important to normalize some of these reactions and to let people know that they're not alone as they're going through this, because this is one of the biggest things that people can go through in their lives. And it is deeply distressing. And without having adequate supports, it can be very difficult to function.
Yeah. So you must talk to people every day who are going through this. What is it you're doing with them? You're helping them recognize that this is trauma that they're experiencing and putting a name on it. And
Um,
go ahead.
yes,
What are you doing?
yes. So I'm helping to just allow them a space, a safe place to be able to talk about their feelings and the emotions without having judgment, without feeling like they have to edit what they want to say. They can be open and share, and have a place that isn't with a person that's not connected to their social environment, with their life. I'm an objective person, and I can bring the ability to help them problem solve through whatever's disturbing them, and breaking down a very large issue into more smaller parts.
Oh, that's really helpful. I think, when the people going through a divorce there are so many issues that they are looking at. And that's what we do as divorce lawyers as well, is we say, okay, look, we're just going to talk about this one particular issue and what your priorities are around that issue and what your concerns are, and how we can come up with an arrangement that works on just that one narrow piece. Because and that helps, if we can come to an agreement, if through negotiations on that one piece, then you start to build some momentum. But it's so overwhelming, when they come to us. There's so many things they have to deal with: finances, financial support, division of property, the child caring arrangements, and so on. And those are just the legal issues. on, like you said, layered on top of that is the emotional issues and sense of betrayal, probably many times, and just a sense of failure, and how other how people, friends and family will look at them, as having a, a failed marriage, or a broken family, right? There's
Yes,
a lot of shame related to it. Yeah, and that can add to the trauma as well, I guess.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, let's look at your next slide, which, this, I find this very interesting, and this is the survival loop. And you described it as this loop that people will get into when they've experienced a trauma. Can
Yes.
you talk about it more?
Absolutely. So this is from Beacon House Therapeutic Services and Trauma Team, and this is the survival loop. And it just demonstrates that when someone feels a threat or there's danger experienced, there's a cue, and we have certain triggers in our life that may set off a whole chain reaction of reactions or experiences that one may go through, and we might fight or experience flight or freeze, where we're not able to really function at our best. And because we can't function our best, we're not taking in or being able to nurture the information or making sense of a cue, and so we may become very reactive. And so I think this is what sometimes happens when one partner may open up their email and see, a nasty email from their partner, for example, that just sets them off, and then it's a chain reaction with the person responding back before they have a moment to kind of digest the information and pause and reflect on it. So this is very common as you're going through a process that is disrupting everything that you normally are experiencing within your family life, and all of a sudden there's tremendous change, and so it's going to take some time for that adjustment. But it's important to recognize that this is what people go through when they're trying to overcome a barrier, and they're fearful of their sense of security being taken away, and so people become a little bit reactive.
So how do you get someone out of that survival loop?
I think one of the things is to understand what those cues are, what are those triggers, and what are some of the messages underlying that. And I think once you have a history of what someone has been through, that can inform you as a mental health professional, but also for the individual going through it. If people recognize their triggers and what's upsetting them, they're able to modify their behavior and their responses, and maybe even how they think about the matter. So there can be a change in their thinking pattern and their behaviors once they recognize what those triggers are.
So that's part of what you do as a professional, is help them recognize what those triggers are, and just helping them understand the survival loop idea. Is that right?
Yes, and coming up with alternate responses that are healthier, so that they will be less impactful to their situation, just to kind of de-escalate the situation a little bit. Sometimes it could be as simple as putting away that email and not maybe reading it once you know that this is from your former spouse, that kind of thing, until things have kind of settled down a little bit. Because sometimes if you just rush into it, and perhaps you're in the middle of trying to sort out something with the children, or perhaps you're trying to work out a work problem, and it sends you into another direction that you don't want to go. So timing is very important. I think taking care of your own personal needs first, to ensure that you're well rested, that you've basically had food to eat, that you're in a place where you're not highly stressed, and that you can react if you need to take care of the situation, is helpful.
So if you're get an email at about 5 o'clock, when you're the witching hour with your kids, they're all hungry and you're trying to make dinner, and everybody's upset, and you open up an email from your ex, maybe you should just close it and read it another time. Is that right?
After dinner.
Or maybe in the morning.
Or in the morning, absolutely. But it's not up to me or you to tell people what timing will work best for them, but I think it's sort of trial and error, right? If they
Yeah.
try it one way and it doesn't work, then we maybe need to replace it with something else. We're just giving a very simple example of an email. It could be
Yeah.
anything. It could be a
Yeah.
pickup or drop off of when you're getting the children, or when there's any kind of an exchange taking place, or perhaps it's an upcoming meeting with the lawyers. It could be anything, or going into court, which can be very triggering for people.
Oh yeah, we had an earlier webinar, and one of the attendees said that when they went to court, they just just lost it. They just sort of lost connection with that thinking part of their brain, and because it was just so overwhelming to them. But that's one of the problems with the court process, is that it's so hard for people. It really tends to flame fan the flames of discontent between the parties. And we still go to court on almost every day. One of our lawyers is in court when it's necessary. But boy, if we can keep people out of court, we sure try to do that, because we don't want to make things worse. We want to help them, right?
Yes.
And have you seen people come to you who've just found that the court's been made things worse?
Well, it's not very conducive to a peaceful process. It's adversarial, and so you're going to have one person against the other person, and so things can get escalated very, very quickly, and that's why the collaborative approach tends to be a very good one for peaceful resolution.
Yeah, collaborative is where each person has their own lawyer, and then we work with somebody trained like you, who helps with the emotional issues and the parenting plans and so on. And then we work with a fourth professional who's a financial professional, and we have a great commitment, a deep commitment to not going to court. And that's one of the hallmarks of and benefits of the collaborative process, is that the professionals agree that if, and the clients agree, sign a contract that says that if one of them goes to court, everybody has to start over with new professionals. So that makes a big difference, Amra. Me as a lawyer, when I am in a collaborative case, I am certainly not going to threaten court, or certainly not going to push any matter toward court, because I'm out of a job if the case goes to court, right? So I personally have a vested interest in helping the parties come to a negotiated settlement. And in other processes, that's not the way at all. But mediation is a similar process, where it's all about helping the family problem solve, helping the family come up with a plan that works for both of them going forward. And it's not about a battle. It's about working together to resolve things in a way that meets everyone's needs, right? A win-win.
Yes.
You have the ecological view of trauma, and this is a very busy slide. Oh my goodness! Tell me about what this is all about. This is interesting.
Absolutely. So this is from Mary Harvey, 1996, an ecological view of psychological trauma and trauma recovery. And this is about the interrelationship between the person, the environment, and the event. And what I love about this slide is it just shows all the various aspects of what makes up a person, right? And their personal traits, their personal history, their relationship to others within their life. Now, they've specifically mentioned offender in here. This doesn't necessarily have to have a criminal element to it, but we certainly do work with people that are having that are coming from abusive environments, that are perhaps also dealing with the justice system. There may be community resources involved. It's a community response. But what I like about this is it kind of looks at everything that may be relating to the individual. How a community responds to the divorce taking place, what is the community response even to COVID-19 and what people are going through during the pandemic, how one's faith, their gender, if there are addiction issues, there's child protection concerns, how the family or friends are relating to this whole matter, how your workplace is impacted, how you're now functioning in the workplace as you're going through this difficult circumstance. And so what I like about this is it just kind of shows you all the different aspects that would impact a person as they're going through a difficult circumstance, so as they're going through a trauma, and the resiliency of that person when they have all of these connections. Now, we know from her research that it's important for people to have networks to help them move forward. What she found was it wasn't necessary that they needed to have professional counseling support, but they just needed to have people that they could turn to, so that those are the ones that are more resilient, like having that network. So that's why I think that this is a very important slide to show people that when someone is going through a divorce, you have the system of the family. And, when one person is going through a struggle, it impacts everyone else within the family. And that's what happens within the community as well. Friends, family members, work colleagues, everyone that hears that there is a divorce taking place, it impacts them on some level. There may be changes in friendships that occur as a result, which could be again the layering of the trauma that I was talking about, because people do respond in different ways depending on what they've been through in their lives.
Wow. And one thing you mentioned to me was that it's like a pressure cooker. Can you describe how the trauma can work that way?
Sure. Well, there's lots of things that are quite disturbing when you're going through a divorce. There are grief responses. There may be issues of betrayal. There may be a lot of sadness, and if one doesn't have an opportunity to express some of those emotions, they may be storing it. And I use the analogy of a pressure cooker, because if that lid is really, really secure and very tight, and that valve isn't open, then that lid may just come flying off at an inopportune moment. And it's very important to have that valve open, if you will, so that they can express some of how they're feeling, so they can get a little bit of a relief. And so that's where a mental health professional may be of assistance, and if need be, but also having a really good support system personally is also very important. And who you pick within your support structure is very important, because sometimes people are conflicted about who they can support if they're mutual friends of both parties. So I think that's also should be a consideration when you're choosing who can support you. People are left feeling very vulnerable when they overshare with people in their lives, particularly if they're not getting the response or the support, if you will, later. So
Yeah, and some people they don't give good advice. Yeah,
that's
we,
right.
we have to deal with what we call the Greek chorus, which are those
Yes.
people who are giving what they think is legal advice, and just really uh, upsets our clients because it's just not appropriate advice at all. And I'm sure that happens with mental health professionals, that people uh, make things worse for your clients and patients, that they feel like they're well, the advice is just not good. They need to talk to a professional, really, like you
Yes.
or me, or and because this isn't our first divorce, right? We've dealt with hundreds of divorces and clients going through divorces, so we have a lot more experience. And your next slide is interesting about families in during a pandemic, and all that's going on. All this is where we're talking about that layering. There's so
Yes.
much uncertainty and so much pressure on the whole family and the family system.
There is. And often parents are really struggling with whether to send a child to school or not. This has been in the media recently, because people may have different perspectives on how best to take care of their child. So this has often come up. People are afraid. There's a little bit of panicking. Is one party maintaining enough social distancing to your liking? Are they masking appropriately? Like how does that impact? And because people are fearful of the unknown, and this leaves couples even having to remain sometimes in the same home because they're not feeling secure in their work environments. They're not sure what's going to happen to them financially, and so as a result, this complicates matters. At least when you're able to leave your home and not work from home, leave your home and go to work, you're having relief from that pressure cooker environment. You're getting a relief from that conflict, but now you're having to stay within the same place, and that can be very, very challenging and upsetting. And also the children are exposed to potentially a lot more conflict, and things can escalate very quickly.
Yeah, it's a tough time for families for sure, and especially if they're going through a separation. And we've actually seen an increase in the number of clients coming to us during the pandemic, because I think, like you said, being in that same home together, it can make things more difficult for people. And if they had maybe a some issues in their marriage at difficult times, when they're stuck in the same home together with all this added pressure of the pandemic, and it just reaches a breaking point, and the relationship ends, and they start calling us.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. But pre-pandemic, they could keep themselves busy outside of the house, busy with friends and family and activities and sports and work, and they could sort of avoid their problems in their relationship. But when the pandemic has forced people in the same house, well, they can no longer avoid them, and either they're able to resolve them, or they end up in separation and divorce, and maybe experiencing a trauma.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, the next slide I think is probably the most important, which is all about what we can do for self-care
Yes.
as much as possible when people are, experiencing a divorce or a trauma of any sort. How do they cope with that?
Yes, self-care, it's super important. Everything from having adequate hydration, good nutrition, getting adequate rest. We function a lot better. Our sleep is regenerative. So if we get adequate sleep, we may be able to think more clearly, may be able to problem solve more clearly and face the things we need to. Practicing gratitude can be very helpful. Connecting with people who are supportive, talking about it when you're feeling full. You don't have to keep all of those things inside. If you're able to do exercise, that can be very helpful as well. It releases chemicals like dopamine and endorphins to help provide a sense of well-being. So grounding techniques, ways to kind of center yourself. This is what a mental health professional can assist with. Relaxation strategies. There are many apps that are available to help people. I really strongly encourage people to use those. Um, focusing on the future can be helpful, and realizing that this is just one point in time, and that generally we have an equilibrium in our lives, and things are um, stable, if you will. But in a pandemic, or when you're going through a divorce, it's very off center. It's like a teeter totter that's completely off center, and it takes time for it to get back to the equilibrium state. But we just don't know how long that's going to take. We do know that people do bounce back a lot quicker when they have good supports in place. And perhaps even people that have been through a similar type of experience that can explain that there is an end to this and won't always be at this intensity right now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I say to clients, this divorce is not your life. If your life is a book, then this is just one chapter, and soon you'll be closing this chapter and moving on with a new chapter. We have another saying in our firm, which is that when one door closes, another one opens, but it's hell in the hallway. And our
Yeah.
clients are in the hallway. They're in that between, the end of one part of their life and the beginning of a new chapter, and it's all that uncertainty, and that it just causes so much stress for people. It's a tough time for people. I know. For me, regarding self-care, exercise is the key for me. I just find I can cope with a lot more stress if I take the time to get on my bike, whether it be outside or the stationary bike in the basement, and spend some time just getting some exercise, or walking the dog even, just getting
Yes.
getting moving. Yeah, moving really makes lifts me up, and it gives me a greater ability to deal with the stresses of my life. Yeah, for me.
Yes. We
Yeah.
know as well, if you keep to your routine as much as possible, that's really helpful as well. But again, when there's so many closures of things that we would normally go to or normally turn to, it just makes it a game changer. You have to start again and do the trial and error until you can find something that suits you. It may be listening to some tunes that are uplifting. It might be doing a Zoom virtual dinner with friends, just so you can have those connections. We need connections in order to function well as human beings. It's important.
Yeah, that's important. That makes good sense. And then the last slide is about new beginnings and fresh start.
Yes.
Yeah.
The reason I put this is just to show people that, this again will not always be where we're at right now. Just this is very intense, but it's important that you realize it's just one point in your continuum, and that trust it will get better, and that your life will return to some stability at some point. And it may be different than what you're currently experiencing, but there will be change. Because that is one thing that we are sure of. There's always change in life.
There's always change in life, and but a divorce is a big change.
It is.
It's hard for people to do, but I think it helps just for people to know that what they're experiencing is so normal, that people going through a divorce, almost everyone has the same emotional journey and experience of upset and you know just being uncertain about what's going on, and not even uncertain about who they are as a person. It's a real shift for people. So I really appreciate you coming into today with this through Zoom and doing this interview. I think that it'll really provide people with some hope that they can get through this time and get through the trauma of divorce and get through the trauma of a pandemic, right?
Yes. Yes.
So thank you very much for coming in, and appreciate it. And we'll talk again soon. Bye
Great.
for now.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.